Stefan, dear, where's that golden bracelet I bought when we traveled to Egypt?
I don't know, Mom. You must have misplaced it again. Honestly, what's the need of expensive jewelry if you never wear them? You just keep misplacing everything. She sat in front of her enormous dressing mirror, which had gold edges, and was having her makeup done by Joan Marpierre, the most famous and most well-known makeup artist in the world. Just one of my mother's rich friends. Just then, my dad walked into the room. I could smell him before I could see him because of the perfume he always had on. Tom Ford Diamond Edition. Only 10 bottles of that perfume were made, and my dad had 6 of them. They each went for about $275,000 a bottle and were notoriously hard to get. He also had on a gray Giorgio Armani pinstripe suit, which also cost tens of thousands of dollars. My father had expensive taste, and I couldn't blame him for that. My father grew up in an extremely poor household with 5 siblings who often went for days without having anything to eat. He saw firsthand the effects of poverty and hardship and swore to do whatever it took to never be poor. From a young age, he had to work numerous hours a day, working several jobs to make ends meet. He toiled endlessly until one day, he finally hit the jackpot. Fast forward many years into the future, and my father was now an extremely rich man. He was a billionaire who owned one of the biggest, if not the biggest telecommunication companies in the world. He also had several companies which made him millions of dollars a year. I was born into this life of extreme luxury, and it's all that I've ever known. A lot of people envy me and wish their family was as rich as mine. Click the link and subscribe button, and who knows, maybe you'll someday become as rich as we are. You can only find out if you try. For as long as I could remember, we had always lived in this enormous mansion on the hillside surrounded by a lot of maids, butlers, and cooks who all served me. They were at my every beck and call. My mother always told me that very few people in the world had or will ever have the kind of wealth we had, and that I was special, and I believed it too. Nobody was allowed to come close to me without my permission, and whenever I walked through the corridors in the mansion, everyone in the vicinity had to stop what they were doing until I was out of there. Despite the abundance of maids and butlers, my mom was always very particular about who interacted with me. She insisted that she was the only one who could attend to my needs. I was always treated differently in school, and I liked it. I remember when Mr. Johnson got fired because he wouldn't stop one kid from sneezing so much. I was the one who demanded his firing, and also the expulsion of the sneezing student. Who did they think they were? The day for college resumption finally arrived, and I was driven there in a limo. It was one of the most prestigious colleges in the country, and I was sure I was going to enjoy it.
All right, my special boy. Take care of yourself and don't forget to call me every day,
my mom said as she gave me a peck on the cheek. Mom, you know I'm not still a child, right? I replied as I got out of the limo. My dad, who was also in the car, handed me a wad of cash and bid me farewell.
Good luck, son.
I struggled to stuff the enormous wad of cash in my pockets as I walked to my lecture hall, and as soon as I turned a corner, I felt something smack into me and knock me over. What just happened? I said to no one in particular as I opened my eyes and struggled to regain my composure. On the floor with me was a girl.
Are you blind?
She asked. What?
I said, are you blind? Because only a blind person would have walked into me the way you did. Maybe if you were paying attention to where you were actually going, instead of just walking around like a headless giraffe, I would now be on the floor.
She screamed at me as she got up and walked away, leaving me stunned. No one had ever yelled at me before. I managed to get up and find my lecture hall, but because I was late, there was only one seat available. I sat down before I realized that sitting beside me was the same girl who had knocked me over. We gave each other cold stares as the class continued. I learned that her name was Elena, and we were both studying the same course. I also painfully learned that she was smarter than me as she had the highest GPA out of everyone in our class after the end of semester results were announced. I came second, and after the scolding I received from my parents, I decided to befriend Elena, learn her secrets, and become better than her, and then get rid of her after I had gotten what I wanted. Second year rolled out, and I made a peace offering to Elena. I got her a brand new iPad and MacBook, and also apologized for my previous behavior. And soon after, we hung around each other and studied together. I became much nicer to her, but after a while, she said she had to tell me something. Is there a problem? I asked, worried.
Yes, there is, and the problem is you.
Elena replied, staring straight into my eyes. I began to panic. What had I done? Did she hear anything bad about me? But I'd been treating her nicely, right? But I treat you nicely. How can I be the problem? A bewildered me asked again.
And that there is the problem. You treat me nicely, but you are a very big douche to everyone else. That's not how it's gonna work. You either treat everyone nicely or this little arrangement we have here ends. You will have to find someone else to study with and tutor you if your behavior doesn't change.
I didn't have anything else to say, so I quietly agreed to her condition, and at the end of that particular semester, we ended up with the same GPA. The more time we spent together, the more I realized something. I realized that little by little I was changing. I noticed it when I wanted to publicly embarrass someone, but I stopped to think about how it would make the person feel. The Steven of before didn't give a hoot about how people felt. He just did what he wanted to do when he wanted to do it. And then it happened. By the end of my 3rd year in college, I finally surpassed Elena. I now had the highest CGPA in class. But instead of getting rid of Elena, I resolved to keep her around and planned to ask her out. It happened when we had resumed for the 4th year. I called Elena to meet me in the school cafeteria, and there I sat waiting, but she didn't show up. I was disappointed, along with the crowd I had gathered to witness the spectacle I had planned. As soon as I saw her in class, I approached her, but she instantly rejected me. I tried numerous times, but they were all met with the same response, and it went on for the rest of the year, which made me angry. I wasn't only angry at her behavior, I was angry because of all I had spent on her. I felt used and betrayed. Throughout the year, she didn't even utter a single word to me, and that hurt me more. I channeled all my feelings of hurt and betrayal into my studies, and I decided that I was going to give this year my all. It was going to be the best year for me, and I studied like I'd never studied before. And it paid off handsomely. Not only did I still have the highest GPA in class, I had a perfect GPA, as I had A's in every single one of my courses that semester. Although I had achieved this feat, I still wasn't happy. I was home for the summer, and my parents were extremely excited about my results. This was what they had always wanted, and they were so overjoyed that they instantly began planning a family vacation to Greece. I was walking around the hallways of the mansion one day when I overheard some of the maids gossiping. They were whispering to each other and talking in hushed tones. I hated it when people whispered around me, as it always made me feel like they didn't want me to know about whatever secret they were talking about. I was about to walk in there to scold them for gossiping, but I stopped as I heard one of them say something that sounded like Elena. Out of curiosity, I hid behind a pillar and listened in on their conversation. They were talking about a girl who was invited to the house and was seriously warned against coming close to me. I decided to come out of hiding and confront the maids. I showed them a picture of Elena on my iPhone and asked if she was the one they were talking about. They replied in the affirmative, and my legs pounded on the exquisite wooden floors as I ran to my parents' room to confront them about it.
Yes, dear, I invited her over to warn her to stay away from you.
My mother replied after I confronted her. It's none of your business who I interact with, and you had no right to say that to Elena, I shouted back angrily.
Well, it is my business, son. You are a special, special boy, and you should not be interacting with just anybody. I did this for you, son, to help you get to the next level. That girl was nothing but a distraction.
Mom said quietly, reaching out her hand to me. As I stood there, I could feel nothing but anger coursing through my body. And in a few minutes, I was out of the mansion and driving to Elena's place with my suitcase packed. I met her mom at the door and I broke down in tears as I told her about everything. She felt bad for me and invited me in. She even called down Elena and explained to her what had happened. Her mom soon left us alone, and all I could do was stare at Elena with tears still pouring down my face. After a few minutes of silence, Elena shifted her chair, stood up, and walked towards the kitchen counter, returning with a wipe.
I understand,
she said as she dried my eyes with the wipe.
I'm sorry for how I treated you all throughout this year. You didn't deserve it, and I should have given you a chance to explain,
she continued while looking into my eyes. I don't blame you. I know how it must have hurt you. You probably thought that I was the one who put them up to it.
That's what I thought. I thought you were just a coward hiding behind your parents to get rid of me, but I know better now,
she said, beginning with a smile. We made up and I drove back home that night. My mom was worried about me as she had called me numerous times, but I refused to pick up. She ran out of the door as soon as she saw my car pull into the driveway.
I'm sorry, dear. I thought it was what was best for you.
You don't always know what's best for me, Mom. You've got to stop interfering in my life. It's my life, not yours, I replied. We had a long talk, which lasted several hours, and my mom apologized at the end of it. She also promised to not interfere with my life anymore. I and Elena met up numerous times after that day, and I soon proposed to her. She said she loved me and would gladly accept my proposal on the condition that I stopped being rude, mean, and an unlikable person. I promised to work on myself to change, and I did so. And after she had seen a significant change in me, she accepted my proposal, and we got married just a few weeks later. We're currently still married, and we are enjoying every second of it. If you enjoyed this, click the like and subscribe button to enjoy more of such stories.
Please give that back, Nina screamed. Not until you do what I asked, I replied. I don't want to. I opened her pencil case and broke everything that was inside. I snapped every single pen and pencil in two. My friends cheered and laughed while Nina looked like she wanted to cry. When I was done, I pushed it all off my desk and onto the floor. Nina rushed to pick up her broken things, and I tapped her on the forehead with my shoe. Before I continue my story, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Make sure you hit the notification bell too, or you'll miss out on the cool stories. Anyway, like I was saying, I was pretty much a terrible person. I only picked on the kids who looked different from me. If they were poor, that made it worse. I thought that poor people were so gross, I considered myself to be better than everyone else, especially the foreign kids. Me, on the other hand, I was blonde, tall, skinny, and absolutely gorgeous. I could get any boy I wanted. People like Nina had to try a little harder because she wasn't perfect like me. To make it better, I was rich. My dad owned 4 cars and my mom didn't need to work because he earned so much money. I got everything I asked for, and I looked down on anyone whose parents couldn't spoil them. How could you not have lots of money? Like, ew. I had no idea that the events which would follow that day would change my life forever. I went home after school, screamed at the butler for not having my favorite drink ready as I walked through the door, and stormed to my room to watch TV. Midway through my favorite sitcom, I heard a knock on my door. "What?" I shouted. "Open the door." It was my mom. I opened the door and she looked at me like she was disappointed. "What's wrong? You didn't get to spend Dad's money today or something?" I asked. She rolled her eyes. "Your principal called about your behavior. Apparently some kid named Nina told her mom you were being horrible to her? That foreign kid? Well, she deserved it." I replied, "I've already spoken to you about this type of attitude. I don't know who you inherited this from. It's like you're the spawn of Satan or something. Anyway, I was just letting you know that I'll be coming to school with you tomorrow," she said. I was angry. The next day, I was angrier. I sat in the principal's office and was distracted by his hideous face. He looked like Mr. Potato Head, except more like a potato and less like a head. He wore glasses, which didn't really match his face, and he had a hideous mustache, which moved up and down while he spoke. "Is that clear, young lady?" he said. "What?" I asked. "Didn't you hear anything I said?" "No, I was distracted by your ugly face. Has anyone ever told you you look like Mr. Lisa!" My mom screamed. She was as red as a tomato and looked like she was about to explode. She got up, held my collar, and dragged me out of the door. My friends saw and started laughing at me. "Mom, stop, you're embarrassing me," I said. "I'm about to do more than that. You'll see," she screamed. "Everyone, listen to me. Remember Lisa's face, because you all won't be seeing it for a very long time. I'm sorry to everyone she's hurt. I promise I didn't raise her like this." She shouted to everyone around who could hear. I wanted to die. She drove us home in silence. Then, when we got home, she said, "Pack your bags." "What? You're kicking me out? That's illegal. I'm only 15, I replied. "I'm not kicking you out. We're going on a little trip tomorrow," she said, then went to the other room and shut the door. I guess she thinks I need to calm down, so we're going on a mini vacation. It's great being rich, I thought. I packed all my favorite clothes and gadgets. I made sure I packed at least 2 power banks and had my phone and backup phone just in case. The next day, my dad wasn't around because he was on a business trip, so I didn't get to say goodbye. My mom asked his driver to take us to the airport, and we were off. She still seemed a bit upset about yesterday, so I tried to make conversation to cheer her up. "So, where are we going? Vegas?" I asked. "No," she said. "To the beach in Cali?" "No," she said again. It was clear that she didn't want to talk to me, so I told myself I'd just wait for the surprise. When we got to the airport, we checked in and she gave me a boarding pass. I read it and screamed. "We are going to India? Why?" I said. "Shut up. We're late. Let's go to the correct gate. Hurry." She replied. She started running and I followed. We went to our departure gate, gave our boarding passes, and got onto the plane. "I'll see you on the other side," my mom said. Then I realized she was going to be flying first class, but she bought me an economy ticket. "What the hell? I can't fly with the poor people," I exclaimed. She chuckled and walked away. I walked to my seat, which was between a huge sweaty man and a 5-year-old. It was awkward, but at least I had all my cool things. It was going to be a long flight. And it really was. That gross man fell asleep and started drooling, and the kid wanted to play with my iPad while my mom was probably enjoying cocktails and a beautiful view over in first class. I hated her. I fell asleep to forget my sadness, and when I woke up, everyone was standing. We had landed. I got up and walked to find my mom, who was nowhere to be found. I got off the plane and went through customs by myself. I figured I'd find her when we went to claim our luggage, but she wasn't there either. I found my bags and walked outside. I looked everywhere, but I couldn't find my mom. I didn't know what to do, so I took out my cell phone and tried to call her, then remembered I was in another country. When I raised my head and looked around again, I saw an Indian couple holding up a sign. It said, "Welcome, Lisa?" That can't be for me, I thought. Then the man looked at me and shouted, "Lisa, Lisa, over here, come." "Yes, that's the girl from the picture," the woman said. I looked around again for my mom, but she was nowhere to be seen. "Come, come," the woman said. I walked over to them because I had no choice. Maybe they were workers at the fancy hotel we were going to stay at. The man took my luggage and said, "It's about a 2-minute walk to our car." I followed, still very confused. When we got to the ugly car, he put my suitcase in the trunk and then sat in the driver's seat. His wife sat next to me in the back. So I haven't introduced myself. My name is Mrs. Cooper, but you can call me Anita, and this is my husband, Harish. "We are so happy that you will be marrying our son, Sanjay," she said. "Oh, what?" I asked. "Your mother didn't tell you? She handed you over to our family so that you could marry our son. He's 2 years older than you are, but we will wait until you are 18 until we send you to live alone with him. For now, all of you will live with us, and I will teach you how to be a proper wife. I don't think you learned much about that in America," she said. "Is this some kind of joke? Where is my mom? I'm going to the police," I shouted. "Well, I'm actually a cop." Harish laughed. "It seems like your mother didn't explain that you sort of belong to us now. But don't worry, we are nice people. Here are the documents if you don't believe me," she said while handing me a folder. I opened the folder and recognized my mom's signature on several papers, which I didn't bother to read. "Oh, I nearly forgot she left you this letter," she said. "You saw my mom? Where did she go?" I asked, wanting to cry. "I don't know. Here," she said, handing me the envelope. I opened it and felt a bit sick. It was hard for me to read while Harish drove along the bumpy road. It read, "Dear Lisa, you've been a horrible person, and I'm honestly sick and tired of having to put up with your nonsense. Therefore, I'm wiping my hands of any obligation to take care of you. I found an advertisement online posted by this family who was searching for a suitable wife for their son. I think it's about time you met new people and had new experiences so you could stop being so shallow, insensitive, and overall awful. Mrs. Cooper will assign you your roles in the house, and you will learn to be a proper wife to Sanjay. Make sure you listen well and do all they say. Love, Mom." I was blinded by my own tears. I couldn't believe she would do something like this to me. After driving for about an hour and a half, we entered a small village. All of the houses were tiny, but the one they pulled up in front of was a bit bigger than the others. It was 2 stories high, but it was still much smaller than my mansion back home. "We're here," Anita smiled. I got out of the car and began walking towards the door. Then I thought, there's no way, absolutely no way. I'm going to live there with these people. I will find a way to escape, and I will make sure that when I get back home, my mom goes to jail forever, because there's no way this is legal. I turned around and began to run. I didn't know where I was running to, but I just ran and ran and ran. Harish ran after me, but he couldn't keep up. Apparently, I was running in circles because I ended up exactly where I started. Anita grabbed my arm and shoved me inside their house. "Don't you ever do that again," she screamed. "We will have to ground you. You will sleep here. I will lock the door and I won't let you out until you promise to behave yourself. I'm taking all your gadgets away too. Don't try to contact anyone," she said while shoving me in a dusty room. There were no tiles on the floor, and there was only a small bed with ugly sheets in the room. There was no bathroom attached like my room back home. but there was a tiny squatter in the corner. Ew, I thought when I sat on the bed and cried and cried. Later, Anita opened the door and put a tray of food on the floor. Then she slammed the door and locked it from the outside. I kept quiet for a few days because I had no idea what these people were capable of doing to me. Then one day, the door opened and Anita and Harish walked in. "We'd like you to meet your future husband, Sanjay," Anita said. "He's our lovely son, and starting tomorrow, you will learn how to cater his every need," Harish said. Sanjay walked in. Although they told me he was 2 years older than I was, he looked a lot smaller. He looked at me and rolled his eyes. "That's the best you could do?" he said to his parents. "I know she's not that pretty, but she will do. We can't send her back now anyway. You'll learn to love her," his mom replied. I felt so insulted. I was one of the prettiest girls I knew. They walked out and I went to sleep. The next morning, Anita woke me up at 5. "Get up, girl. You will learn how to make Sanjay's favorite breakfast today," she said. I got up and went to their kitchen for the first time. It was a small room, and they had one old fridge and a stove which looked like it would break down any moment. "Watch everything I'm doing, because tomorrow you'll have to do it all on your own," she said. It was so demeaning. I never even had to cook for myself when I was back home, and now I was being forced to learn how to cook for someone I never agreed to marry? Later, Anita made me sweep and mop the house. Then I had to dust all the books on their small bookshelf. The worst part was doing Sanjay's laundry because they didn't have a washing machine. I had to do it all by hand, and I had no idea what I was doing. "You're doing it wrong!" Anita shouted, and she tapped my hand. It hurt. Then I had to learn how to make Sanjay's favorite lunch and dinner. By the end of the day, I was exhausted. I went straight to my room to sleep. "No, it's not time for relaxing. You have to get to know your husband before the wedding, which is next week, by the way. I've bought your outfit and everything. Hurry up and do as you're told," Mr. Kapoor said whilst pulling me off my bed and pushing me into the living room where Sanjay was sitting. I refused to talk to him, and the next morning, Anita woke me up at 5 again to cook breakfast. I tried to remember what she taught me, but I got it all wrong. When I served Sanjay, he took one bite and threw the whole plate on the floor. "Clean up this garbage, because that's exactly what it tastes like," he said. I was so devastated, and I wanted to cry. I missed my beautiful life. Right now, I was nothing but a servant to a stupid boy I didn't want to marry. I realized I had been too hard on people for no reason. I wished I could go back to school. I'd say sorry to Nina for treating her so horribly. The day of the wedding came, and I was forced to wear a hideous outfit I hated. I spent the entire day crying. We had a typical Indian wedding, and they did things to me which I didn't quite understand. "Now you have to kiss him. You're officially married," Anita shouted. At that moment, I blacked out. I think I must have fainted. When I woke up, I was staring into my mother's eyes. I was on a hospital bed. "Ah, you're up. I hope I taught you a good lesson, you little monster. It was all a prank. I didn't marry you off, but if you continue to behave like a terrible person at school, I'm going to do it for real. Get up, let's go home," she said. Never before had I been so thankful to be pranked.
Dating is not easy, and breaking up is even worse. After sharing my life with Sarah for 1 year, she decided that relationships were not for her. What kind of woman allows you to introduce her to your friends, family, coworkers, ancestors? Well, maybe not ancestors. Then, to say that she was not ready to be in a relationship. Hey, my name is Dwayne, and boy do I have a story for you. But first, like and subscribe to our channel. Hit that notification bell too, so that you can watch more stories like the one I'm about to share. After breaking up with Sarah, I swore off dating. My routine was work and home, and that was just fine by me. My friend Ryan, however, didn't think that I should let one bad apple spoil the entire bunch. "Hey, Dwayne, it's time to get back in the game," Ryan said as we were sitting at my apartment watching a basketball game. "I'm good. Being single isn't that bad," I said, knowing fully well that Ryan wasn't going to drop the topic. "It's been 6 months, bro. You can't let Sarah win. You are a great guy," Ryan said. "What do you have in mind, Ryan?" I asked, looking over at him with a raised eyebrow. Ryan went on to tell me about this dating site that he was on called Single to Mingle. He said that he found his current girlfriend on this site and it really worked. I was very skeptical, but Ryan convinced me to try it out. I gave him my phone and let him create an account for me. I actually didn't think about the site until I heard a notification sound on my phone a few days later from the Single to Mingle app. I opened up the app and realized I got a message from a woman named Audrey. The message read, "Hi Dwayne, how are you?" I clicked on her profile, however, it did not have much information other than her name and a few pictures. Well, I said as I checked through her pictures, she is easy on the eyes. I don't have anything else to do, so I might as well answer. I responded to the message, and before I knew it, we were discussing the movies we enjoyed, the places we visited, and the fact that our friends encouraged us to try out the dating site. I found myself wanting to get home to chat with Audrey on a daily basis after that night. She was so easy to talk to. I couldn't wait to ask her out. After 2 weeks of chatting online, I asked Audrey on a date. Since we both drove, she told me that she would meet me at the restaurant. I must admit that I was sweating bullets when I got to the restaurant, but my nerves calmed down once we got to chat and swap stories. After dinner, we walked to the cinema that was 2 blocks away to see The Haunted Arena. Imagine finding a woman who enjoys horror movies as much as I do. Once the movie was over, we went for some ice cream, then we headed back to the cars. I opened her door and thanked her for a wonderful evening. Audrey and I eventually swapped numbers and we began to spend more time together. After 3 months of casually dating, I asked Audrey to be my girlfriend. About 6 months after being exclusive with Audrey, I was up for a job promotion. Hey, guess what? I called Audrey excitedly. Let me guess, Audrey said slowly. Mr. Mitchell loved the pitch that you did for Mrs. Cavendish, and he said that you were up for a junior executive assistant job promotion. I chuckled. Yes, he loved it. Mr. Mitchell invited me to Mrs. Cavendish's party this weekend, and I wanted to know if my gorgeous girlfriend wanted to be my date. Your gorgeous girlfriend would love to be your date as long as she heads to the mall to get a perfect dress for the event, Audrey snickered. Oh no, a mall run, I laughed playfully. Okay, I'll meet you at your place at 5 p.m. and we'll go together. After searching the mall for 4 hours and some stores twice, Audrey finally found the perfect black dress, shoes, and accessories to wear to the party. My legs were numb. Hey, how about we grab something to eat at the food court and sit for a while? My legs are killing me, I said, one arm draped casually around Audrey's shoulder and the other one holding her bags. Sure, anything for the boyfriend who has the patience to shop with his girlfriend, Audrey laughed heartily. While eating at the food court, a lady with a small child in her arms approached us. Hi, Felicia, how are you? I haven't seen you in years. Is this your husband? The lady asked, looking over at me. Audrey stopped eating and looked at the lady coldly. Sorry, but I believe you have the wrong person. The lady insisted. Come on, Felicia. Is this one of your tricks? It's me, Stacy. We went to college together. You have the wrong person, Audrey said, this time in a very aggressive tone. I've never heard Audrey raise her voice before. I think it's time to go, Audrey said, looking at me intensely. Before I could respond, Audrey was getting up from the table. By the time I got off my chair, Audrey was halfway down the food court, and I had to run to catch up with her. Audrey, wait, hold on, I said as I grabbed her arm when I finally caught up with her. Probably a mistaken identity, Audrey said, still visibly upset by what just happened. I have no idea who that lady is. We left the mall immediately and decided to spend the rest of the evening home. On the night of the party, I knocked at Audrey's door at 7:30 p.m. sharp. We had 30 minutes to arrive at the party. I was slightly annoyed when Audrey opened the door wearing a robe and a towel was wrapped around her head. Why aren't you ready? We have 30 minutes to get to the party, I said as I stepped into the apartment. Audrey looked at me with a blank expression on her face. I rambled on. Did you forget about the party at Mrs. Cavendish's tonight? I have to make a good impression tonight or that promotion is as good as gone. I sank into the sofa and massaged my temples. No, I didn't forget, but what am I going to wear? Audrey asked. I looked up at Audrey. What about the dress you bought a few days ago? Wasn't that meant to be for tonight? The same dress we spent hours at the mall looking for? Listen, Audrey, if this is some kind of joke. My voice trailed off. Relax, Dwayne, I have it covered. Give me 15 minutes. Tonight is going to be great. Audrey winked at me as she hurried to the bedroom. As promised, she was ready in 15 minutes and we were off. By the time we got to the party, it was in full swing. I introduced Audrey to Mr. Mitchell. Audrey, you have a man here who is destined to make it to the top, Mr. Mitchell said. He continued, do you mind if I steal him for a few minutes? There are a few people I would like to introduce him to. No problem, I'll be fine, Audrey said, flashing a smile at me. Even though I was smiling at the clients that Mr. Mitchell was introducing me to, my mind was with Audrey. I felt bad for inviting her to the party, then abandoning her instantly, until I realized that Audrey was moving around the party chatting and laughing as though she planned the entire thing. Mr. Mitchell seemed to notice as well and said, anybody who could work a crowd like this is definitely a keeper. Once I had finished making my rounds with Mr. Mitchell, I reunited with Audrey. "Would you like a drink?" I asked, leading her over to the bar. "I'll have a margarita, please," Audrey said to the bartender. I looked at her. Audrey was a creature of habit. She always, and I mean always, ordered the same things. "Since when do you drink margaritas?" I questioned. "It must be something in the air," Audrey laughed. After the party, I dropped Audrey off at her apartment and reminded her about our movie date the next day. After the movies, we saw Candace, one of my oldest friends. We actually grew up together. "Hey, Dwayne. Hey, Audrey. What did you guys think about the movie?" Candace said as she walked beside us as we headed to the exit. "I give it a 8 out of 10. May actually come back and see it again another day. Audrey and I are going for drinks. How about you join us?" I asked, not realizing how quiet Audrey had become. "Sure, I'd love to. Which bar are you guys headed to? I can meet you there," Candace said. "Carlos, off Charlotte Boulevard," I said. "Okay, cool. I'll meet you there," Candace said and walked towards her car. We got to the bar, ordered some drinks and something to eat, but I could feel a tension between Audrey and Candace. I didn't understand it since Audrey and Candace met a few times and they really hit it off. When Candace excused herself and headed to the washroom, I used that time to speak with Audrey. "Hey, what's the matter? Why are you so tense all of a sudden?" I asked as I kept an eye out for when Candace would return. Audrey turned to me and said, "Did you know that Candace had a crush on you while you guys were in high school?" My face turned red. I did not know that. I always saw Candace as a sister. Is that what you're worried about? "I am a one-woman guy," I smiled. "It's not you that I'm worried about," Audrey said. "A girl never gets over her first crush. I don't think it's wise for you to keep seeing her." "I can't just not be friends with Candace anymore because you're a little jealous, Audrey," I said. There was a tense silence between Audrey and I for a few minutes. When Candace returned, I pretended that everything was okay. Even Audrey seemed to lighten up a little. "Okay, ladies," I said after checking my watch. "We have to work in the morning, so I think we should call it a night," I said. "Let me go pay the bill and then we could head out." Little did I know, that was the last time that Candace and I would spend time together. By the time I got back to the table, Candace left. Audrey said that Candace had an emergency and needed to leave. When I got home, I tried calling Candace, but it went straight to voicemail. Over the next few days, I tried calling, but nothing. I decided that I would go and see Candace. Candace opened the door long enough to slap me in the face and tell me that she never wants to see me again. I stood there, astonished. I had no choice but to abide by Candace's wishes. Audrey and I had been dating for a year and a half, and even though there had been some rough patches between us, I wanted to make it to the next level. It was time to propose. With the help of Ryan and the staff at the restaurant where we had our first date, they made the proposal perfect. Ryan taped the entire thing while the staff held up cards saying, "Will you marry me?" when the dessert was brought out with the ring sitting on top of the cake. She said yes. Now, to the guys watching this, if you ever want to see another side of that sweet, faithful girl that you're dating, then ask her to marry you and watch how she reacts when planning the wedding. I barely even recognized Audrey through it all. It was as though she became a totally different person. She became a bridezilla. Audrey wanted everything to be just perfect, and she bossed everyone around, even me. I was beginning to wonder if I'd made a mistake. I spoke to my dad about my fears and he chuckled. "Your mother was just as crazy. Every little girl has a dream wedding in her head, and when the wedding planning actually happens, all she wants is the perfect wedding." I never regretted marrying your mother, though. It was one of the best decisions of my life. I decided to trust him and go ahead with it. It was the day of the wedding. I was standing by the altar as I watched Audrey walk down the aisle. We decided to have the wedding at my parents' house since my mother's garden was perfect. As she walked towards me, her white dress glistened in the sun, and I daydreamed about how our life would be after the wedding. But the best day of my life didn't turn out as expected. During our vows, someone burst through the back door of the house and into the garden where the wedding was held. It was a woman covered in dirt. It looked like Audrey. I looked at the woman standing next to me, then at the woman who just came through the door. How could there be two Audreys? "What the hell is going on here?" I asked my bride. "Why don't you tell him what's going on, Felicia?" the woman said, coming towards us. She continued, "Why don't you tell Dwayne that you tried to bury me alive?" A gasp rushed through the small congregation. Audrey grabbed my arm and said, "That's a lie. My sister has spent most of her life in an asylum. Don't believe anything she says." The woman stepped closer. "Dwayne, please, hear me out. I'm the Audrey that you met on Single to Mingle." She continued to say everything that happened during our first date. She said that she asked her sister to go out with me a few times when she had to go out of town on business because she didn't want me to think that she wasn't interested in me when she worked a lot. I wondered why she didn't tell me the truth from the beginning, but before I could do that, Felicia lunged at her sister and grabbed her by the throat. "I am sick and tired of you getting all the good men," cried Felicia. "Now it's my turn to get a good man." The rest of the day was spent getting restraining orders against both women, just in case. You really didn't think I married the real Audrey, did you? I mean, how could you keep a secret such as a twin sister from someone that you claimed to love for almost 2 years? Some of you may be saying I should have realized that something was wrong, but love makes you see what you want to see. Now, not only have I sworn off dating, but I've also sworn off dating sites as well.
Lisa, what is wrong with you? Why can't you help Mom? You know she has never asked any of us for anything, I yelled at my sister. Exactly. Zara, she never asked for anything, so why are you pushing this?
Because she is your mother, our mother. Last year was hard for her. She was sick, and because of that, she's behind on her mortgage. If we don't help her, she's going to lose the house.
She has her 2 favorite people to help her. I worked hard for everything I have. I wasn't given anything unlike you two. She doesn't need me, and I don't need her. Get out of my office before I call security. Lisa sat behind her desk and folded her arms. My brother grabbed my arm before I could lunge at my sister. Hi, my name is Zara. Before I continue my crazy story, like and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to tap that notification bell. Okay, now that you've done all that, let's get back to the story. I can't believe her, I growled at the dinner table that night.
You know, Lisa was always stubborn.
Shamar said as he piled more chicken onto his plate. What she needs is someone to whoop her butt. But I've got something better planned. I smiled slyly.
I know that face. What are you thinking?
If she doesn't want to help her mother, then there are a few ways to loosen her grip on her money. I'm so sick of her thinking she's better than us because she has money. I got up and retrieved my laptop. I will add Lisa to a dating site with her picture. Of course, saying how much money she has, and the fact that she enjoys the finer things in life, I said dramatically.
I don't think this is the best way to go.
Anyway, I said after ignoring Shamar, once we set her up, the gold diggers will come running. Then we pay him to do what he does best, even marry her. She needs to be taken down a few notches from that high horse she's been riding the past few years. After creating the profile, I waited for the message to roll in. After dinner the next night, Shamar and I checked Lisa's fake profile and searched through the many messages and chose someone who we thought would be the perfect gold digger for our plot. His name was Bryce Morgan. Shamar and I set up a meeting with Bryce and explained exactly what we wanted him to do. Make her spend her money extravagantly. We wanted weekly updates on what was going on as well. We also agreed on how much we were going to pay him. After the meeting, we told Bryce the usual places that Lisa hangs out. After a few days, I wanted to reach out to Bryce to find out how things were going, but Shamar told me not to spook him by being clingy.
We told him to reach out to us every week. Let the man do what we paid him to do without interruptions,
he said. I couldn't help but feel excited as Bryce's number finally lit up my phone. I called Shamar and I quickly put the call on loudspeaker. Hey, Bryce, how are you? And how are things with Lisa? I asked excitedly.
Hey, Zara, things are actually going great on this end. Just like any professional gold digger, I made sure that I spent my money on a very lavish first date. I'll let her get comfortable with me paying for everything. Once I get her hooked on that comfort, after a few weeks, I will slowly start to fall back and leave my wallet at home or make suggestions about things I'll want along the way. By that time, she'll be hooked and wouldn't even know it. Do you think she suspects anything?
Shamar asked.
No, she doesn't. Must say though, she was a tough cookie to crack, but I've got her where I want her. We'll be going on our second date tomorrow night. Might even fly her out to Paris for a week.
Shamar and I exchanged looks. I mouthed to him, maybe I should get a gold digger. We both laughed softly. We thanked Bryce for the update and hung up. Every week after that, Bryce called on time with weekly updates. Shamar and I visited Lisa a few times at the office, and she wasn't there, which wasn't like her. Janice, her secretary, said, I've never seen her so happy with a man. So you've met him already? Oh, Janice said. I just thought that she introduced him to you guys already. I don't want to overstep my boundaries. It's okay, Janice. We wouldn't say anything. What do you think about him? He's been nothing but the perfect gentleman to her. Honestly, if I found a man like that, I would never let him get away. Shamar and I thanked Janice and walked to the car.
Zara, I think we should tell Lisa about this before she gets too invested.
I looked at Shamar with disbelief. Too late, bro. The wheels are already in motion.
Aren't you a bit worried things might go sideways?
Why should I be? So even if it does go sideways as you think it might, if we get her to stop being such a Scrooge, then it would be worth it. Just don't tell her anything. We are in this together. After the first 3 months, Lisa began to come around and decided to help Mom out. I looked at Shamar with a "I told you so" look, and he shrugged. Later that evening, I told Shamar that once we got Mom up to speed on her mortgage, we needed to find a way to break up Lisa and Bryce so she would never know we were involved. Shamar agreed.
But didn't you tell him to marry Lisa the last time we chatted?
Stop worrying about the details, Shamar. People get divorced all the time, and I don't see a man like Bryce being faithful for too long. Stop overthinking it. When that time comes, we will fix it. The next week, Bryce did not call as scheduled. Shamar said that we should give him some slack since he has been calling and giving updates regularly. By the time the second week rolled around, Shamar also began to wonder. We decided to check on Lisa at the office since she wasn't answering her phone, which, by the way, was a Lisa trait, so we weren't too worried when we got her voicemail.
Hi, Janice. Is Lisa in?
Shamar asked as we approached her desk. Lisa has been away from the office for the past 2 weeks. Do you know where she went? I asked. No, but she did say that she should not be disturbed unless it's an emergency. I'm actually happy that Lisa is getting a chance to relax. She hasn't taken a vacation in 5 years, so she plans on using her time wisely. Did she go with Bryce? Janice nodded. But don't ask me where they went because I have no idea. We thanked Janice and walked out the office and headed to the car.
Do you think he married her already?
Shamar asked. I'm not sure, but why not tell us about it?
I don't like this,
Shamar said as we waited for Bryce's scheduled call.
This is the 3rd week with no contact, and Lisa still isn't answering our calls or messages.
So what do you think we should do? I asked, refusing to admit that this had gone too far, even though my stomach was in knots.
I think it's time to get the police involved.
Shamar and I went to the police station to make a report and file a missing persons report. The police said that there was nothing they could do about it since Lisa told Janice that she was going on vacation. Shamar said that they had not been able to contact Lisa in 3 weeks, and it wasn't like her. After a while, the police finally decided to look into Lisa's disappearance. Shamar gave them a listing of all Lisa's getaway spots in the country. They also said they would check the airlines to see if she left the country. Do you think they will really look into it? I asked Shamar as he opened the door for us to exit.
Honestly, I really don't know,
he said grimly. That night, Shamar and I decided to confess to Mom what we did. If anything happens to Lisa, I will never forgive the both of you. Mom walked away, leaving Shamar and I feeling helpless and filled with regrets about what we did. Did you call the station? I asked, frustratedly.
Yes, but still no leads,
Shamar said as he slammed his phone on the kitchen counter. It's been 2 months. What do you mean they don't have any leads? I don't think they're even looking for her. I grabbed my keys and said, time to take matters into my own hands. I walked to the front door and opened it. Shamar! I screamed. Shamar came running immediately. He screamed as he pushed past me to hug her. Shamar, I need to breathe, Lisa said jokingly. He let her go and grinned. Where's Mom? Lisa asked. She's at work, but she'll be home shortly, I responded. Are you coming in? No, I just came to tell you guys the great news. Shamar and I looked at each other before returning our attention to her. I got married, she said, flashing her ring in front of our faces. Before I could respond, she continued. I'd like you guys to meet him, so I want to take you guys and Mom out to dinner tonight, so you could meet him. And before I forget, I watched as Lisa dug into her purse and pulled out a piece of paper and handed it to me. That check should cover the rest of Mom's payment for the mortgage. Lisa gave us the name of the restaurant, the address, and the time to meet before disappearing into her car that was parked in the driveway. So he did marry her, I said, closing the front door.
Now all we need is a plan to get rid of Bryce.
See, I told you it would work out, I said, relieved. We went over to the restaurant. She said she would meet us for 7. It's already 7:30. I looked towards the entrance of the restaurant. Your sister is always late. I thought you'd be accustomed to it by now. Mom chuckled before taking a sip of the wine. Before heading out to dinner, the 3 of them decided that it would be best to come up with a plan together to get Bryce out of the picture.
Here she comes,
Shamar said as he stood to greet them. I watched the newlywed couple walk towards us. Suddenly, I heard a glass shatter next to me. I turned towards my mother. She looked as though she had just seen a ghost, which was quickly followed by rage. She stood up and charged at Bryce, Shamar and I not knowing what to do. Joel, what are you doing here with my daughter? Lisa looked at Shamar and I, then at Mom. Mom, this is Bryce, my husband. So this is where you've been all this time with my daughter? I thought you were on an important business trip. Lisa, this man has played you for a fool. Mom? I asked in confusion. You know Bryce? His name isn't Bryce, it's Joel, and I thought you loved me. Mom turned to Bryce. He didn't say anything. I watched as Mom stormed off and Shamar went to console her. By now, everyone in the restaurant was looking in our direction.
Baby,
Bryce said, taking Lisa's hand.
I have no idea what that woman was. I've never seen her in my life. You know that I will never hurt you. I love you too much.
Despite the looks from the other customers, Lisa and Bryce sat down. The tension at the table could cut through steel. Bryce's phone rang and he excused himself to answer it, saying it was a business call. It's now or never, I mumbled as I cleared my throat. Look, Lisa, there is something I need to confess to you. I told Lisa everything. I told her about the fake profile and hiring Bryce to soften her up and marry her so that she would be willing to help with Mom's mortgage. I told her Shamar wanted nothing to do with it and it was all my idea. You know, for a sister, you've done some really crappy things, Zara. This, by far, is the worst. Tears streamed down my face as Lisa got up and exited the restaurant. Over the next few days, Shamar and I tried to call and visit Lisa. She changed her phone number, and we were no longer allowed to enter her office building. We even drove to her house, but the only thing we saw was a for sale sign on our gate.
What did you expect to happen, Zara? I should have never let you talk me into it. But I also made that choice to deceive Lisa. Now, we just have to wait until she's ready to speak to us.
Is Mom going to be okay?
Mom will be fine. She did confess, though, that the reason she missed some payments was because she was giving Bryce money.
I really messed up, but at least Mom got to see Bryce for who he was.
I guess, but you really need to leave, Lisa, and let her get through this. I believe when she's ready, she's going to come around.
After a few months of not seeing Lisa, I decided to make a video telling Lisa how sorry I was, and I hoped that she would forgive me. I did not go into details about what transpired, but I just wanted to let her know that I loved her, and I just want to make amends. About a week later, I got a phone call from Dr. Shirley Thomas. She was a counselor. She said that she was calling on behalf of Lisa, and Lisa requested a family session with me, Shamar, and Mom, so that we could work through this together. After the first few sessions, Lisa told us that she forgave us, but she still needed time to process some of her hurt. She also told us that she divorced Bryce and his real name was Matthew Miller. My family and I still go to weekly counseling sessions because mending our family and keeping it together is the most important thing for us right now. Don't be afraid to get the help that you need. Therapy works as long as you allow it to.
I looked at Miguel with a confused look on my face as he knelt on one knee with an engagement ring box in his hand. What are you doing? I asked. Hi, my name is Kelly, and I've got a crazy story to tell. But first, like and subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to hit that notification bell too. My mother, Laura McCline, introduced me to Miguel when I was just about 10 years old. We had recently moved because she got a new job. She wasn't keen on leaving me alone, so she hired a babysitter. He was 18 at the time and came highly recommended from wealthy people in our neighborhood. Being an only child, I never saw Miguel as a babysitter, but as an older brother. The older I got, the more comfortable I got with discussing topics that I never would with my mom. For example, boys. And I also developed a sort of crush on Miguel as well, which I kept well covered for fear that my mom would fire him. Even though Miguel and I built a great relationship over the years, I never heard him speak about his family or any friends. I didn't even know where he lived. When my 16th birthday rolled around, my mother told me that I didn't need a babysitter anymore. Miguel and I stayed in touch for a while, then we went off the grid for a few years. When I was around 21 years of age, I got a phone call. My heart skipped a beat when I realized it was Miguel. We chatted for a few hours. Then he asked if he could see me the next day, and I agreed. When Miguel came to the house the next day, my mother had already left for work. We had a few drinks, and I cooked lunch as we caught up with each other's lives. Then something happened that left me speechless. I watched as Miguel got down on one knee and asked me to marry him. I looked down at Miguel with a confused look on my face as he knelt on one knee with an engagement ring box in his hand. "What are you doing?" I asked. "I'm asking you to marry me," he said seriously. I thought that he was joking at first, but the tone of his voice sounded strange. "But didn't you just tell me that you had a girlfriend and she was pregnant?" This was what shocked me even more. We had just been talking about his girlfriend, and he had seemed so happy and in love with her. I hadn't expected him to just cast her aside like that. Miguel sank to the floor, defeated, and placed his head in his hands. I sat beside him and said nothing, as I waited for him to open up and tell me what was really going on. Eventually, he turned to me and said, "This was my girlfriend's idea." I bit my lip in an attempt to be quiet until he finished talking. He continued, "I'm in the country illegally, but if I marry someone from here, then it would buy me more time." I was extremely confused at this point. Why don't you just marry Melissa? After all, she's your girlfriend. Melissa is still married. Her divorce will take too long to finalize, Miguel said sadly. It's not that I didn't believe Miguel, but I needed to call Melissa up to find out how she felt about this entire thing. I got her number from Miguel and invited her over. After she confirmed everything Miguel said, she continued, "I don't have any friends that I trust to do this. And when Miguel spoke about you, he said he would trust you with his life, and he was willing to take that risk. I trust his judgment." "This is the only option that I have," Miguel said, his eyes pleading with mine. "I don't want to be away when my daughter is born." Melissa chimed in. "His mother's also willing to pay you $100,000 to marry her son. If you decide to marry him, it is just to keep him in the country. I will do the rest." She winked at Miguel, and he blushed. I couldn't imagine my life without Miguel. It had been 11 years since he came into my life and made it better. The past few years without him, I felt like a fish out of water. I was happy to help him and his little family. The next day, unbeknown to my mother, Miguel and I went to the courthouse with our two witnesses, Melissa and one of Miguel's coworkers, Brian. As soon as we stepped outside the courthouse, Melissa went to the car and brought out a briefcase. "Here you go," she said as she opened the case. $100,000 delivered as promised. She closed the case and handed it to me. I took it and handed over my wedding band and the marriage certificate. A few days later, my mom took me to dinner. My eyes locked with a guy, and I felt my heart flutter. He looked a few years older than me. It looked as though he was also having dinner with his family. Throughout dinner, he made these cute, funny faces, and I would giggle. When my mother and I were about to leave the restaurant, he approached us. "Good evening, ladies." He smiled at us. Then he turned to my mother and continued, "I would like to ask your daughter on a date, if it's okay with you." By this time, I was red as a cherry, and it took my mother her sweet time to say yes. "I'll be outside if you need me." My mother winked at me. I placed my hand on my face, embarrassed by my mother's antics. He introduced himself as Jet, and we exchanged numbers. Later that night, Jet sent me a message and asked if it was okay for him to call me. I said yes, and it was the beginning of a beautiful relationship. Throughout the year that Jet and I dated, I never told him about my marriage with Miguel, although I did introduce Miguel and Melissa to him. Melissa seemed relieved that I had a boyfriend. I guess it made her feel secure that I wasn't trying to steal Miguel from her. Jet and I were even invited to the christening after their baby was born. Melissa gave birth to a beautiful baby girl named Ava Grace. One night, just as I was about to snuggle into my bed after a long day, I got a call from Miguel. He never called me this late. "Hi, Miguel. Is everything okay?" I asked worriedly. I heard him sigh heavily over the phone. "Can I see you?" he asked. "Now?" I looked at my clock and it was 10 p.m. "If it's not a problem." "Sure, no problem. I'll be there in 20 minutes. And he hung up. I got up and got ready quickly and waited outside for him. I didn't want my mother to wake up and give me the 100-question scenario. Miguel pulled up and I jumped in. The silence in the car was deafening. We pulled up at Miguel's place. Would Melissa be okay with me coming over at this hour? I asked with a raised eyebrow. She and Ava Grace went to her mother's for the weekend. It's all good, he said as he hopped out of the car. I followed Miguel inside. For the first hour or so, we ate snacks and watched movies, but at the back of my mind, I wanted to know why Miguel wanted to see me in the first place. I cleared my throat. Miguel, is there something you've wanted to talk? I watched as Miguel walked into the bedroom and came back out with his phone. He handed me the phone without saying a word. I took the phone and pressed play on the video that was on the screen. My mouth dropped when I recognized Melissa and Brian, Miguel's coworker, dancing and kissing in a club. Miguel, I'm so sorry. I threw my hands around his neck and pulled him close. Miguel relaxed into my arms, and we just held each other for a few minutes. So what are you going to do now? I asked as I slowly moved out of his grasp to look into his eyes. Well, when I found out, I took Ava Grace for a paternity test without Melissa knowing. I got back the results earlier today, and I found out that Ava Grace isn't mine. I confronted Melissa, and she confessed that she wasn't sure. She moved out today and went to stay with her mother, he said, and he shrugged his shoulders. The hurt in Miguel's voice was almost unbearable. I didn't know how to comfort him or help him deal with this sudden change in his life. What can I do to make it better? I asked. Can you stay the night? Miguel asked. I agreed to spend the night with Miguel. I texted Jet and told him that I had a long day and I would probably sleep in the next day. I also messaged my mother and told her that I was spending the night at Jet's house so she wouldn't be worried when she woke up the next day and didn't see me. I didn't tell her that it was actually Miguel I was staying with, in case she started worrying about Miguel. Over the next few weeks, Miguel and I spent a lot of time together. I even blew off a few dates with Jet to spend time with Miguel. I told Jet that I had a lot of work to do, and he wasn't pleased because he knew I was a workaholic and had my moments. One night while out at dinner with Jet, a wave of nausea came to me. Kelly, are you okay? Jet asked in a concerned voice. I'm okay. I smiled weakly. Jet called the waiter and asked for the bill. I excused myself and told him that I needed to go to the bathroom. As soon as I stood up, a wave of dizziness came over me, and I felt my knees buckle. Jet caught me just before I hit the ground. He scooped me up like a baby and held me close. I heard him tell the waiter that he was going to take me to the car and come back and pay the bill. When we got to the car, Jet made sure that I was secure before rushing back into the restaurant. I kept my eyes closed for the entire trip home as Jet gently caressed my hand during the ride. We went back to his place. He got me ready for bed and then tucked me in. I fell asleep the instant my head hit the pillow. The next day, Jet insisted that I go to the doctor, so we went. To his surprise, and my dismay, the doctor said that, yep, you guessed it, I was pregnant. After the doctor's office, Jet took me to a little cafe to get breakfast. Please, don't tell my mom yet, I pleaded. I want to tell her when the time is right. Jet nodded in agreement. I watched as he removed a small black velvet box from his jacket. I've been carrying around this box for months trying to figure out the right time to do this, he said. He stood up and walked over to my side of the table, and he knelt in front of me. A small "aww" escaped the lips of the few customers and employees in the cafe. He took my hand and looked into my eyes. Kelly, will you marry me? I looked around the cafe at the hopeful faces, then down at Jet. I forced a smile and nodded as he slipped the ring on my finger. An applause rose from the cafe, and a look of victory on Jet's face was somewhat amusing. All I could think on the ride back to my house was how I was going to tell Jet I was already married. My mother was excited when we announced our engagement. She went straight into preparation mode, even though Jet and I had not even set a date for the wedding yet. I excused myself and left Jet and my mother talking excitedly. I went to my room and messaged Miguel. I told him that I needed to see him urgently. That night I snuck out and met Miguel. I told him about the events that took place that day. He listened attentively, and when I finished, he looked at me. So what do you want to do? Do you want to get married to Jet? He asked. I know. I don't want to raise this baby on my own, I cried. Miguel looked at me as though he was about to say something, but decided against it. He told me that whatever I decided to do, that he would support me. The next 3 months were very hectic, as I decided that I would get married to Jet before I began to show. I didn't dissolve my marriage with Miguel. because he still did not have citizenship in the country, and I did not want to jeopardize that for him. I did, however, invite Miguel to the wedding. That morning, I was more sick than I had ever been. My mother thought it was just my nerves, since I didn't tell her about the pregnancy yet. I was finally ready to walk down the aisle. I took my uncle's arm and looked around the church for Miguel's familiar face, but it was nowhere to be seen. I couldn't help but feel somehow hurt. During the ceremony, there was a commotion outside the church. A few seconds later, Miguel burst in through the front doors of the church. "Jet!" he shouted angrily. "Don't you have something to tell Kelly?" "Miguel, what are you doing?" I asked frantically. Just then, a woman and 2 children walked into the church. I recognized her as one of the ladies that sat with Jet at the restaurant the first night we met. "Jet, why don't you introduce Kelly to your wife of 6 years?" Before I could react, my mother was at my side and slapped Jet squarely in the face. "Your business here is done," she said angrily. "I think your wife is calling you." Jet walked away and walked straight past the woman and children without saying a word. I couldn't believe it. Jet was already married, and he hadn't told me. I mean, I suppose I'd done the same to him, but still. My mother apologized to the guests and told them that they were more than happy to stay for the food and drinks since they were already paid for. Everyone cleared out of the church, and my mother left Miguel and I to talk. "Thank you," I said. "Anything for the woman that I love," he said and leaned in to kiss me. I was shocked. Miguel was actually kissing me. We pulled apart, and I said, "I think it's time to tell my mom about our marriage." Miguel held my hand and said, "Let's go. No matter the outcome, just know that I will always have your back." I gave birth to a baby girl that year. Her name is Isabella, and she's now 5 years old. I was a bit disappointed when the paternity test came back, and Miguel was not the father, but that didn't stop him from loving Isabella with all his heart. We are currently expecting a boy soon, to complete our little family. If I had to sum up my experience, I would say that love truly conquers all.
I grew up poor, and when I say poor, I mean poor. I was homeless. My parents had abandoned me when I was just a toddler. My uncle had managed to raise me himself, but eventually he died when I was just 13 years old. I didn't want to move into a foster home, and definitely not an orphanage, so I decided to run away. I learned to live on my own, and I managed to get by, but it was hard, very hard. Let me tell you my story. Before I go on, make sure you like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any more crazy stories. It was hard learning how to survive on my own. I only had a few belongings and no money at all. It was also pretty dangerous for a young girl like me to live out on the streets. But I taught how to defend myself, and pretty soon I was part of a gang of homeless people, and we all looked out for each other. I was smart. I knew how to manipulate people and how to talk to them in order to get what I wanted. But life was really tough. I barely got enough food to keep me from starving. I lived under a bridge, and sometimes I could hear the rats crawling around me. When I was young, many kind people offered me food and water and gave me money. But as I grew older, people became less and less generous. I guess it was because they thought I was old enough now so I could earn myself some money. I did try to get a job, I really did. But no one wants to hire someone who's wearing raggy clothes that has holes in them or who smells like a dumpster, so I had to try to earn money in different ways. Okay, now I don't like talking about this part. You see, I had to sort of break the law. I stole. I'm not proud of it, but sometimes I would go to a grocery store or a supermarket and I would steal some food. But I couldn't help it. I was starving, and if I didn't steal that food, then I would die. But then again, stealing isn't always the answer. Anyway, I managed to steal myself some nice clothes and some soap, and I prepared myself for my first job interview. It was at this huge company, and I was going to be working as a low-paid assistant. But I was fine with that. As long as I could earn myself enough money to get by, I was happy. I got ready for my first job interview. I was wearing some long pants and a jacket. When I entered the room, I was so scared the employer would realize I was actually a homeless person in disguise, but they didn't seem to suspect anything. The interview went great. They told me they would call me if I got the job, but I didn't have a phone, so instead I asked them to send it to my email. And after that, each night I would log onto a computer at a nearby internet cafe, whose owner was a good friend of mine. He didn't care that I was homeless and let me use the computer to check my email. Days passed and I didn't get any email. I was starting to think I would stay homeless forever, but then on the 5th day after the interview, I got an email from the company. It read, "Congratulations! You got the job. Please report to the building tomorrow at 8 a.m. sharp for your first day at work." I was so excited. I told the owner of the internet cafe I had got the job and we hugged each other and were jumping up and down for joy. Then I returned home, or rather the pile of cardboard boxes that I called home, and told my friends who were homeless too. Some looked jealous, but a lot of them were so happy for me. Finally, I was going to earn some money. The next day I got ready wearing the same clothes as before, and I even made sure to wash myself in the river nearby, so I didn't smell on the first day at work. I walked over to the building since I had no car, and I couldn't afford a ticket for a bus, so I was kind of sweaty when I arrived. But the first day went fine. It was really easy. All I had to do was type up some number sheets and basically work as the boss's assistant, printing stuff, getting coffee, organizing meetings. It was pretty fun, too. I worked like that for a few months and things ran smoothly. My boss was really nice, too, and I could tell he was super rich. For lunch every day, he would have some sort of expensive meal. One time, I saw him eating a bowl full of caviar. No one suspected I was homeless. As far as they were concerned, I was just a normal assistant with a normal house and a normal life. After a year of saving, I finally got enough money to rent a small place for myself. I was sad to say goodbye to my homeless friends, but I was also so happy to be able to actually live independently and earn money. For the first time in what seemed like forever, I had a roof over my head. But I still wanted more. I still wanted to earn more money. I still wanted more things, more objects, more possessions. I got greedy. And so I decided there was another way of earning money. A less honest way, but effective nonetheless. I could try to become a gold digger. I know, what a terrible idea. But at the time, I was desperate for more money. And plus, there was a lot of wealthy guys at my workplace. There were so many opportunities to get money from them, so I decided to take it. First, I decided to practice with one of my colleagues. I actually searched online how to be a gold digger, and it said it was all about seducing them. Be charming, laugh at their jokes, even if they're not funny, and make sure you're really loving if they buy you anything so that you train them to buy you stuff again. Like a dog almost. My first practice was with a guy called Tony. He wasn't really rich, but he was well off. Richer than me, at least. I walked up to him one day and I complimented him on his tie. "That's a really nice tie. You look so cute in it." I smiled at him and batted my eyelashes. "Oh, thanks, Lola. It's pretty cheap. I got it at a yard sale," he replied. That was my cue. I started laughing a lot, even though that joke was really bad, and Tony seemed all embarrassed. But he was looking at me differently now, and I believed I had him under my snare. After that, it was easy peasy. I asked him out, and we went on several dates, and finally he started buying me gifts. First, a bouquet of flowers, then some jewelry, then we'd go out on a holiday together. I was living the sweet life. Now, I didn't actually love Tony. He was pretty boring. But I loved his money, so I was fine with sacrificing my romantic life if that meant I had more money. But then Tony wanted to marry me. Now, like I said, Tony wasn't super rich. He was only slightly above average, and I had already planned my next action. I was going to go for the biggest of the lot, the richest of the richest, my boss. The thing was, my boss, Michael, already had a girlfriend at the time, so I needed to make a plan to break them up, and I had a good idea of how I could do that. You see, my boss's girlfriend and I look pretty similar. We have the same brown hair, same tall figure, same dark eyes. Both of our names even started with an L. Mine, Lola, and her name was Lily. Anyway, I had created a plan to frame her for cheating on Michael, and she was going to be kissing my boyfriend, Tony. Sounds confusing? Well, let me show you how I did it. First, set up a camera in a room at Tony's house while he was away. Then I asked Tony to come into the room. Beforehand, Lily had visited my boss at work, and she had left her jacket behind. I stole it, and I was wearing it now. Then I suddenly kissed Tony with the cameras recording everything. After I was satisfied I'd gotten enough pictures, I pushed Tony off and left without another word. He was so confused, but I guess he was still a little dazed from that sudden kiss. I went home, hopped on the computer, and started to edit the photos. I used a program that could blend two faces at once, and I got a picture of Lily and blended her face in with mine so that, in the end, it looked like she was kissing Tony, not me. Then I typed up an email to send to Michael. Here's what it said. Michael, hi, it's Lola, your assistant. I know this may be hard to believe, but I've caught your girlfriend Lily cheating on you. You may be wondering how I know this. Well, I know because she's been cheating with my boyfriend, Tony. I've attached some pictures of them kissing. I caught them kissing when I walked into the room and had my phone with me, so I immediately snapped a few pictures as proof. I thought it was best if you knew. I know this sounds weird, but would you want to meet up for some coffee tomorrow? We could have a little chat. Warm regards, Lola. The plan was in motion. Michael replied back a few minutes later saying how shocked he was and that he was glad that I told him. He said he would be happy to meet me for coffee. The next day, he told me he had confronted Lily about it. She pretended it didn't happen, said Michael. And when I showed her the photos, she still said it didn't happen, even though the proof was right there. I can't believe this. I thought Lily was the one. Don't worry, Michael, I said and smiled at him with my most charming smile. You'll find someone new sooner than you may think. I saw him blush then, and I knew I had him wrapped around my little pinky. Pretty soon, we were dating. He soon forgot about Lola, and he was treating me with all sorts of gifts. Things were going great. He was pretty nice too, and I think I actually liked him back. Then came the next phase of my plan. I needed to marry him. I kept hinting at him that I wanted to get married really soon, and then we had a romantic dinner at a fancy restaurant where I was pretty sure he was going to get down on one knee. And sure enough, he did. I said yes immediately, and then someone appeared at our table, and my plan was ruined. It was Lily. Michael, she said, don't marry this liar. I was framed for cheating on you. What? Michael was so shocked. Don't listen to her, Michael. Trust me, I said. But then Lily pulled out a photograph, and I knew the game was up. Look, Lily showed Michael the image. This photo has been edited, and see this scar here on this person's hand? I don't have that scar. She suddenly grabbed my hand. But Lola does. Michael, please, you have to trust me. Lola framed me. Well, that was it then. Michael was furious at me, and he immediately took the ring off my finger and told me we were through. Michael and Lily got back together. I, of course, was fired from my job, and I'm now very poor. I guess my plan to trick a billionaire into marrying me backfired. I'm poor, but I have hope. I'll find a way to make money again.
Hi, my name is Amy. I'm 19 years old, and up until recently, my life had been perfect. I was at university studying to become a lawyer. Everything was going just how I always wanted, until the day I fell into a coma and woke up married to a stranger. Let me tell you how it all began. But before I go on, make sure you like and subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any more crazy stories. I had always wanted to be a lawyer since I was a little girl. You see, my dad was a lawyer. He was the best dad in the world. I wanted to be just like him. I used to watch all the crime programs on TV and dream how one day I would be in the courtroom on the prosecution team. I was accepted to the same university my dad had gone to. It was all going to plan. I loved my days at university. I had lots of friends there, and studying was so much fun. I loved the lectures. My friends thought it was funny that I went to every lecture or event I possibly could. That's how I met James. James was my boyfriend. He was tall and handsome and had big brown eyes. The night I met James was a cold, windy night. It was raining, and I almost didn't go to the event. It would have been so much nicer to stay home with a cup of hot cocoa. But I was determined to be the best lawyer possible. So I made the effort and went to the event. James was standing in the corner when I arrived. I noticed him straight away. I wondered who he might be. I was soon to find out James was the speaker at the event. He was a lawyer with one of the biggest firms in our city. He was very successful, and everyone admired him. After his speech, I went and stood close to him, hoping he would notice me. Eventually, he turned around and smiled at me. My heart melted. I felt dizzy. He came over and introduced himself. We got along so well that evening. He asked me for my number, which, of course, I gave to him. The next day, James called me and asked me to go out on a date. I said yes, of course. We soon began dating regularly, and James asked me to be his girlfriend. James was the perfect boyfriend. Well, almost perfect. The only thing was that he was a little bit jealous. When we first started dating, I thought it was cute that he wanted me all to himself. He didn't like me going out with my friends. Sometimes I would make a plan to go out with my friends, but when I told James, he would look all hurt and say, "Oh, but I had planned for us to go out for a romantic meal." So I canceled my plans with my friends. This happened a few times. Or if I did go out with my friends, James would be jealous, calling me all the time and getting angry if I didn't answer my phone. The final straw came one Friday night. James was coming over to my house. He had his own key, so I told him I would see him there after I finished at uni. Our lectures finished early that day, so I was excited to get home and surprise James. I quietly opened the door and went into my room. I was shocked to see James was sitting at my computer. He was searching through all my emails, checking my photos. I had always known James was a little jealous, but I didn't think he would do this to me. "What are you doing?" I shouted. James looked at me, startled. I could see he looked guilty. He knew I had caught him red-handed. "That's it, James. I can't take it anymore," I said. "I want to break up with you." James started crying and begging for my forgiveness. "I'm sorry. It will never happen again," he said. "It's over, James," I said. I ran out of the house, but he wouldn't let me go. He ran after me, chasing me down the street. I kept looking back over my shoulder, but he wouldn't give up. I didn't see what was in front of me. Workmen were digging a big hole in the middle of the street. I ran forward and suddenly felt myself falling. I hit my head with a thud, and that was the last thing I remembered. I had hurt myself badly. I was in a deep coma. I was taken to a hospital and plugged up to lots of different machines, all beeping and buzzing and doing their best to keep me alive. My parents came to the hospital. Mom was crying and Dad looked worried sick. The doctors explained that I was in a coma. My body needed time to repair. They didn't know if I would ever wake up. James came to the hospital. When he saw my parents, he started crying. He told them that we had been so happy. In fact, he had proposed to me that evening and I had said yes. He told my parents he just wanted to be my husband. My parents agreed with him. They said that if I had said yes, then they would give their blessing. That's when James came up with his plan. He told my parents that he had heard about someone getting married to the love of their life when they were in a coma. Mom looked a bit surprised by this, but Dad, being a lawyer, said that yes, it was possible. So they began to make plans. Mom went out and bought a beautiful white dress for me. James went and bought the rings. The big day came, my wedding day. They organized for a vicar to come to the hospital. Mom sat there with a big smile on her face, wearing her best hat. Dad had a tear in his eye as he said he agreed for James to marry his daughter. After that, James never left my side. Weeks went by. Nothing changed. Until one day, I suddenly became aware of the noise. I could hear the buzzing of the machines. I blinked my eyes and looked up to see I was surrounded by doctors and nurses with smiles on their faces. They all seemed so happy to see me. I was confused. What was going on? Where was I? I tried to sit up, but the doctor said, "It's okay, just rest. You're in a hospital. You have been in a coma for a very long time." The nurses were making me comfortable in bed when one of them said, "Would you like to see your husband now?" What? Husband? What was she talking about? I thought. With that, a man walked into the room. He was a complete stranger to me. I had no idea who he was, but apparently we were married. "Hi, I'm James, your husband," he said. The doctors had told him that I might not remember everything from before my accident. James told me how happy we were. He said that we had had a wonderful life together. We never spent a day apart. We only needed each other. I believed him because why wouldn't I? All the nurses told me how devoted he had been to me whilst I was in a coma. I knew I should be happy, but I couldn't help feeling something wasn't quite right. One morning I woke up from a really strange dream. In my dream, James and I were arguing. That couldn't be right. James had told me we never argued. The dreams came more often. They were so true to life. I started to wonder if they might be showing me how life with James had really been. Then it hit me in a flash. I remembered. I knew James was lying. I remembered how jealous he had been with me. When James arrived at the hospital, I told him I knew everything. My memory had come back. "That's it, James," I said. "It's over. I know you have tricked me." James stood up angrily. "You are my wife," he hissed. If you tell anyone about this, then I will tell everyone that you cheated in all your lawyer's exams. I will tell them I gave you all the answers. Everyone will believe me because I'm one of the best lawyers in town." I knew it was true. I would have to stay with James or I would lose the career I had always dreamed of. I left the hospital and went back to my life. I wanted James to think that I had accepted his deal. I pretended that we were really happy together, but secretly, I was miserable inside. I had to think of a plan to get out of this marriage. But what could I do? James would never let me go. I decided I would try to look for something to hold against him. As soon as I had the chance, I got a hold of his phone and started reading through his old messages. I was hoping to find something that I could use against him, but I wasn't expecting to find out the reason he was jealous. There were lots of messages from a girl named Sarah. The messages were all from before I had met James. There were messages every day for months and months until all of a sudden, they stopped. Sarah had been the love of James' life, but something had gone wrong. She left him and broke his heart. So that's why James had always been so jealous with me. He didn't want to get his heart broken again. I began to think up a plan. If only I could get James and Sarah together again, then he would let me go. I searched through Facebook looking for Sarah's profile. I knew they would have mutual friends, and it didn't take long before I had found her. I started stalking her moves. I needed to know where she hung out. I noticed that she often went to a gym close to my house. I knew what I had to do. That afternoon, I went down to the gym and signed up to become a member. I actually hated going to the gym, but this would be worth all the effort. I knew Sarah always went to the gym on a Sunday morning at 10 a.m. The next Sunday, I packed up my gym bag and set off to the gym. When I got there were only a couple of people in the room. I recognized Sarah straight away from her profile picture. I sat down on the machine next to her, and it wasn't long before we had struck up a conversation. We hit it off straight away. I knew so much about Sarah from her Facebook page, it was easy to say we liked the same things. "We should meet up for dinner," I suggested. "I know a really good Mexican restaurant." "Oh, I love Mexican food," Sarah smiled. "How about next Friday at 8 o'clock?" I asked. "Perfect. See you there," she replied. Friday morning came around, and as I was leaving to go to university, I said to James, "I have a late lecture this afternoon. Can you meet me at the Mexican restaurant at 8 o'clock? "Sure," said James. The plans were all in place. I just needed to get to the restaurant a little earlier so I could find a table in a quiet spot to see what happened. Sarah arrived first. She sat down at a table in the middle of the room and ordered a drink. 5 minutes later, I saw James walking through the door. He looked across the room and his face lit up. He had seen Sarah. At the same time, Sarah looked up and saw James. You could feel the love in the air. They ran towards each other smiling. "I've missed you so much," they both said at the same time. I knew at that moment I was free again. Sarah and James ended up getting back together, and James soon forgot about me. I was completely fine by that, and I am now free to live my life, and hopefully I won't end up marrying another stranger again.
What is that?
It's a miniature wedding dress. I'm going to put it on my Barbie.
You're 13 years old and you still play with Barbie dolls? That doesn't look like a dress. It looks like tissue paper arranged in a strange way. Now, students, this is no way to speak to Evelyn during our sewing class. Your dress is very beautiful, dear. In fact, I think it's magical. Now, don't you worry about what the others are saying. You are talented.
She shot the other students a mean look, then continued smiling at me, but it was unfortunate that she couldn't come to my rescue after school because at that time, more of my classmates followed me and asked me to show the dress to them so they could laugh. I was so upset that when I got home, I threw it in the bushes in my garden and marched up to my room. This dress would eventually change my life, and if you want to find out how, you have to keep watching.
What's wrong, darling?
Nothing, I said and slammed the door in my mom's face. I regretted that, of course, because she was upset with me for the rest of the day. It really wasn't my day. A few months passed and I stopped being creative at school because I didn't want to be teased. Things were going smoothly and people started to treat me like I was a normal kid. Then one Saturday, I spent the entire day inside watching TV, and my dad told me to go outside.
For some sunshine and fresh air. You can't spend your life indoors when we have such perfect weather here.
Ugh, fine, Dad. I went outside and walked around the garden. Then I noticed a cute squirrel with something in its mouth. Hey, buddy, what you got there? It dropped the thing and ran up a tree. I picked the thing up and gasped. It was my miniature wedding dress. Surprisingly, it still looked the same way it did when I threw it into the bushes. What was that squirrel doing with it? I looked at it and smiled. It really wasn't bad at all. My classmates were probably just being mean for no reason. I took the dress inside and put it on my dressing table. Then I went back to watch TV. When I went back to my room to get ready for bed that night, I looked at my dressing table and screamed. My doll was standing on it, wearing the dress. My mom ran to my room to see what was wrong. Mom, did you put the dress on the doll?
No, wow, that's a pretty dress. Did you make it?
Yes.
It's lovely. Well, don't worry. Maybe your little brother just decided to play a prank. Or maybe he likes dolls now. Who knows?
She rolled her eyes and left the room. Later I asked him, but he insisted that he had nothing to do with it. I thought he was still lying. I tried not to think about it too much until the next day. When I woke up, it was the first thing I saw, and I went over to pick it up. I turned the doll round and round and thought that the dress looked quite pretty. Then I noticed something strange. A little piece of paper was sticking out from the bottom. I pulled it out and realized that it was a note. I opened it, and it read, "This is a magical wedding dress. Write the name of the person you want to marry and stick it on me." Could my brother be playing another prank? But he couldn't write that well yet. I decided to give it a shot anyway. I wrote Chad's name and stuck it on the dress, then I hid the doll under my bed. The next day, I went to school and forgot about everything that happened the day before. In the middle of Spanish class, our teacher walked out of the class to go to the bathroom, and Chad walked up to me looking a bit nervous.
Would you have lunch with me today?
Okay. The other girls in my class looked confused. Chad was the cutest guy at our school, and he only hung out with the really popular kids. Anyway, lunch was awesome, and Chad asked me to be his girlfriend. I said yes, of course, even though we hadn't taken much time to get to know each other. But we were 13, and that's how things work when you're that age. It only hit me while I was walking home from school that afternoon. Oh my gosh, the dress! It really works! So, long story short, Chad and I stayed together until our 3rd year in high school. He was head over heels for me, but eventually I got bored with him, and I wanted a new adventure. I had my eyes on the lab technician at school. Yeah, I knew he was a bit older than I was. He'd just left college that year, but I decided it was worth a try. I wrote his name under my magic wedding dress and waited to see what would happen. I wondered whether I had just been hallucinating as a child, or if I got lucky or something. But if I could make this gorgeous guy fall for me, it meant that my dress was definitely magical. Would you believe that not even 5 minutes passed when I noticed that someone new added me on Snapchat?
Hey, beautiful. I know you from school, but I'm not a student. I just wanted you to know that I think you're the most amazing human being I've ever encountered in my life.
I replied instantly, and I felt amazing. I didn't have to do any work to make anyone fall for me. After a few weeks of avoiding him, but using his obsession to feel better about myself, I decided to try to date the school heartbreaker. His name was Michael, and next to the lab tech, he was the second most gorgeous guy at our school. But he was around my age, so I guess that was safer, right? Michael was a womanizing jerk, though, and because he knew he could get any girl he wanted, he'd date someone for a while, then move on to the next. I wanted to teach him a lesson and maybe break his heart too. So I wrote his name under my wedding dress and waited. At school the next day, Michael came up to me at lunchtime.
Evelyn, will you marry me?
What? I nearly choked on my sandwich.
Oops, that's not what I meant to say. Would you like to go out with me this Saturday?
I'm sort of busy, but ask me again next week, okay? He walked away looking defeated. It felt so good. After I was done torturing him, I did go out with him for a few months, and everyone was shocked that he was so faithful. He didn't make moves on any other girls, and all he could talk about was me.
Hey, I was thinking maybe we could apply to the same colleges so we wouldn't have to be apart from each other.
He said to me one day. That made me cringe a bit. Michael, I don't think this is working out, and I don't think I want to go to college.
What?
So there, I did it. I broke his heart. You're probably wondering why I said I didn't want to go to college. Well, if I had the power to marry anyone I wanted, I figured I could just get some celebrity to marry me, and I wouldn't have to do anything. Just sit around a mansion all day, bossing the servants around. Sounds great, huh? My parents didn't accept the news that easily, though.
Not going to college? So what are you going to do for the rest of your life?
Oh, you'll see. They were upset with me, but I didn't care. I had work to do. Which celebrity would I choose? I spent nights just Googling cute guys and trying to decide which one I'd be most compatible with. I settled on the hottest rapper in existence, and I won't mention his name, for privacy reasons, of course. I wrote his name under the dress, added him on Instagram, and started sending him messages, but I got no reply. After a few days, I was about to throw a fit, because what if the magic had worn off? I really didn't want to go to college. I was in my room, about to start crying, when I heard a scream downstairs. I ran down to see what was wrong. The door was open and my mom was pointing at someone outside. I walked closer, and my jaw dropped. It was him.
Hey, darling. I realized you sent me a few messages, but I wanted to reply to them in person. Would you like to go out with me tonight? I booked a fancy restaurant in Italy.
Italy? But how will we get there?
I have a private jet, unless you don't want to go. We could do something else. I just want to get to know you better, baby.
My parents were speechless and my little brother looked like he was going to faint. I could barely contain my excitement, but I had to pretend that I was calm for the sake of my new future husband. In case you're wondering what it's like dating a celebrity, it's amazing at first. You get to go to all kinds of expensive places, they buy you lots of stuff, you get to meet other famous people, and you don't have to do much work. I was really enjoying it at first, but then I became sad because he didn't pay much attention to me. It wasn't because he wasn't obsessed with me, it's just that he was always so busy. A few years passed and we did get married because, like I told you, there was no way I was going to college. Michael and the lab tech were heartbroken when they heard about our marriage because apparently writing a new guy's name under the dress didn't stop the previous ones from obsessing over me. But I was still sad because my husband had no time for me. And as time went by, I developed a crush on Stanley, his assistant. Stanley was always cracking jokes and asking me if I was okay. I couldn't stop thinking about him because he really made me happy. And one day, as I was about to write his name under the dress, I decided that I wanted him to fall in love with me naturally. I kept sending him little hints, and then eventually we had a conversation about it.
But you're married to my boss, Evelyn. Yes, I do have feelings for you, but think about how complicated that would be.
I have an idea. I told my husband that I needed help to start a fashion business in another state. He was very supportive and gave me all the money I needed to start. I had lots of customers too, because I was a celebrity's wife. Stanley quit his job and came to live with me. We are together now, and my husband has no idea. Whenever he comes to visit, I just ask Stanley to go somewhere or hide or whatever. So things did work out for me anyway. I'm rich and I'm with the love of my life. And it doesn't have to be like this forever, because if I decided I wanted to marry into the royal family tomorrow, I could. Isn't that cool? Not controlling at all.
After a long, boring car ride, I had finished unpacking my stuff at the beach house and headed downstairs. The beach house was very cozy, decorated with seashells and maritime-themed pictures. Pictures of my family hung all over the walls. Pictures of me with my mom and my sister, picture of us individually, and pictures of my stepdad. There were no pictures of my stepdad and I, because Arthur and I never got along. My sister had dozens of pictures with him. They were as thick as thieves. There was one specific picture that I hated. It was my mom, my stepdad, and my sister Alice. They smiled brightly at the camera and looked like a very happy family. I hated it, because it showed that I wasn't an important part of our family. I went into the kitchen where my mom was sitting, sifting through some flyers, and my sister was painting. I instantly cringed at the horrible smell of the paint thinner my sister was using. The smell was overpowering. "Mom, I'm going out to the town. I'll be back later," I said. I grabbed my keys off the counter, but my mom snatched them out of my hand. She motioned at my clothes and said, "You're not going out dressed like this and smelling stronger than a skunk." She always did this, so I just rolled my eyes. We got into an argument right there in the kitchen, while my sister painted and my stepdad snuck around behind us. She counted the amount of things she didn't like on her fingers. My perfume, my shorts, the way I had my hair up, and my makeup. "You mind me wearing perfume, but you don't care about the stench of my sister's paint thinner," I yelled. I was done with the fight, so I grabbed the keys from her again and ran out the door. On the porch, I debated whether I should leave or not. I didn't want to make my mom angrier, but I also didn't want to give her the satisfaction of keeping me from having fun. I sat on the steps of the porch for about 5 minutes. Then the door opened. Arthur and Alice came outside. Arthur went straight to the car, but Alice turned to me and asked if I wanted to go to the town with them. I did want to go, so I grabbed my bag and headed towards the car. "Wait, where's Mom?" Alice asked me. I had just heard the squeaky back door shut, so I told her Mom must have gone down to the beach for a walk. Alice said she needed to spit out her chewing gum, so she ran inside real quick and came out running even faster. The ride to town was nauseating, with Alice and our stepdad acting like best friends. Alice had turned her seat at the front and put her legs on Arthur's lap as they sang along to their favorite songs. I sat in the back with earbuds in, trying to ignore them by looking out the window. When we arrived in town, we realized it was full of people and cars because there was a festival. The town square was full of rides and booths with games and food. We spent around 2 hours checking out every booth and trying to win the best prizes. Arthur thankfully stayed out of my way, and I stayed out of his. Both of us just wanted to spend time with my sister. After having won the cutest little stuffed animal, I checked my phone. I had a voicemail from my mom, which was odd because she usually left 3 voicemails and 20 texts if I didn't pick up the first time she called. I listened to it. She apologized for the fight and said she was too tired for a walk and would take a nap instead. "What are you listening to?" Alice asked me. "Nothing. Mom just sent me a voicemail saying she was too tired for a walk and wanted to nap instead," I replied. Alice's face drained in color and her mouth stood agape. She whispered something in Arthur's ear when she thought I wasn't looking, and his face also fell and became like hers. Alice looked like she was deep in thought, and her eyes got teary for some reason. She noticed I was looking at her and said, "I think all the food is making me sick. We should go back home." While walking back to the car, Arthur tried putting his hand on Alice's lower back to comfort her. She moved away. While approaching the house, I heard Alice and Arthur arguing over my music, but I wasn't able to understand what they were saying. I sat forward, toward them, and then a loud cloud of black ash appeared in front of our car. Arthur accelerated, and we pulled into our street. My eyes widened when I saw the fire. Our beach house, along with all those happy memories, was enveloped in flames. Firefighters were trying to put the fire out, but they weren't succeeding. I remembered my mom. I ran frantically around the trucks and police cars, trying to find her. But then I looked at the house. She wanted to take a nap, so she was probably in there. I let out piercing screams as I struggled against the paramedic who was keeping me from running into the open flames. Then I was escorted towards the ambulance, where they had me sit down and drink water. But I could still feel the heat that was radiating from the house onto my face. The first time I left my room again was a week after my mother's death. A week after we returned to our city. Alice had been leaving trays of food on my bedside table, but I felt bad having her do this, knowing she was grieving just as much as I was. So I figured it was time to try and get back to normal slowly. As I walked down the hall of our apartment and towards the kitchen, I had to stop every 2 steps, because the pictures of my mom on the walls felt like a stab in my heart. I walked into the kitchen, and to my surprise, I found my sister giggling on the counter as Arthur fed her pieces of a very large cookie with some writing on it. Alice saw me come in, and immediately hopped off the counter and gave me a tight hug. "What's going on? How come you're so happy?" I asked her. She fidgeted with her fingers and then turned around to Arthur, who looked at me with a blank expression. I looked at the cookie they were eating, and although half the words were gone, I could tell what it was meant to say. "We're getting married!" Alice exclaimed, tearing up with joy. She then walked back to Arthur and jumped on him with a hug. "What the hell, Alice? He's our stepdad!" I yelled at my sister. "Not only that, but he's a pig. He's so gross!" "Hey!" he shouted at me. My sister began to explain to me that they had developed feelings for each other since the beginning, and that they started liking each other at that dinner we had years ago when our mom introduced us to him. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I felt nauseous, and I felt like crying about my mom again. "This is disgusting. He's just taking advantage of your grief," I shouted at Alice. I felt like she was betraying the memory of my mother. I took their cookie from the counter and I smashed it on the ground. Then I tackled my sister and sat on her stomach, restricting her. I shook her shoulders, trying to get some sense into her. She kicked and screamed, but so did I. I felt a pull from behind as Arthur yanked my hoodie and slammed me on the floor. "Get the hell off your sister," he barked at me as he pinned my arms at my sides, but I managed to kick him in the stomach. As he recoiled in pain, I slid away from him and ran back to my room. I quickly packed all my essentials in a backpack and then waited at my door until I couldn't hear my sister and Arthur. It was nighttime when I could tell they had gone to bed, so I slid out of my room and walked out of the house, but not before grabbing some food from the pantry and a picture of my mom. After a few days, I was settled into a small motel room. I would have preferred literally anything else, but it was all I could afford. I was working night shifts at a diner nearby to afford food. I was so lonely. I just wanted my mom back. One day, I was sleeping when the shrill ringing of a phone woke me up. It was my sister. "Andrea, are you there?" she asked. "Yes, now what do you want?" I asked back coldly. I could hear her voice trembling. She told me she was marrying Arthur in 2 weeks, which felt like a stab in the back. My mom had died not even 6 months ago, and my sister was marrying our stepdad? It was messed up. up in so many ways. I hung up the phone when she invited me, but not before I got the address and time the reception started. I wasn't going to the ceremony. The thought of it made me nauseous, but the reception, I might drop by. I started taking more shifts at the diner because I couldn't show up to my sister's wedding in sweatpants, could I? I found the perfect dress at a small boutique. It was black, of course, and would be perfect for my plan. I watched from afar as guests flooded the venue. It was no surprise that nobody from our family was there. They'd be against the marriage, too. I teared up when I saw my sister. She glowed in her puffy white dress and had a huge smile on her face. She waved at the guests like a princess, but then Arthur put his arm around her waist, and when they kissed, I wanted to scream. I was absolutely disgusted. I waited until dinner was about to be served to enter the venue. As soon as my sister saw me, she clasped her hands over my mouth in surprise and ran towards me, giving me a big hug. "I'm so glad you made it," she said through tears. She looked at my dress, which made her frown. "Some of us are still in mourning," I said. She sat me down at a table with complete strangers as the waiters went around placing food in front of everyone. It was the first proper meal I had had in a long time, so I really pigged out, not minding the looks I was getting from people at my table. Time for toasts finally came, and I was more than ready. I tapped my champagne glass with a knife and stood up. People at all tables turned towards me, and I smiled at Arthur's frown. "Well, first of all, I'd like to thank everyone for being with my little sister on her big day," I said loud enough for everyone to hear. "I would also like to ask how you felt when you got the invitation. Were you thrilled to attend the wedding of a stepdad and his stepdaughter?" I continued. I could hear gasps all around me, and I saw my sister's mouth fall open. I went on a rant about how my mother had just died and my sister married a widower. They looked at the couple in disgust. People from Arthur's family, whom we had never met, got up from their seats and demanded that he explain what was going on. When I saw that the party was in chaos and the bride was crying, I shouldered my backpack and I walked out. It was late at night and I left the party and was returning to my motel room. I opened the door with my little card, and before I could turn the lights on, I passed out when something hit the back of my head forcefully. When I woke up, I shivered. I recognized the place immediately. It was in the partially charred attic of my mom's beach house. I was tied up to a chair, and since the roof was burnt, I could see a lot of the sky. The sun hadn't risen yet, but it looked like it was just about to. I heard steps, and my sister climbed up, followed by Arthur. She had tears streaming down her face. "You ruined the happiest day of my life. How could you?" she screamed at me. But I was unfazed. "You married our stepdad right after our mom died. How could you?" I screamed back. "It's your fault Mom's dead. She wasn't supposed to be here when it happened." She screamed back at me with a sob. She revealed the truth about the fire. "Arthur and I spilled paint thinners everywhere so we could light the house on fire and elope with the insurance money," she sobbed. It all started coming together in my mind. Arthur always loved my sister because they were together. I told them Mom had gone on a walk, so when she came back the house would have been on fire already, but she was tired because we fought, so she took a nap instead. It was my fault. I should have checked my phone sooner. I realized as tears began streaming down my face. Arthur grabbed Alice's hand and started pulling her towards the ladder to leave. I started kicking and screaming at them to untie me. Arthur stalked over to me and, getting as close to my face as he could, said, "This is the least you deserve, you brat." When I heard the car speed away, I stopped screaming. I began wiggling my arms, legs, and torso until the ropes began to loosen. I was able to untie myself, but all my stuff was gone. I was hours away from the city. I didn't know where to go. I ran down to the beach where the sun was beginning to rise, but found myself so weak that I collapsed crying. My mom was gone, and now so was my sister. I could have prevented this, all of this, if only I had picked up the phone. I know that it's probably every girl's dream to find true love and get married to a charming, handsome man. We all have some sort of idea of what we want our weddings to be like, but we think of other things too, right? Surely there was more to a girl's life than aspiring to get married. Wrong. Bouquets, corsages, bridesmaids, cake, garlands. All I could think about was my wedding day. I was obsessed. So obsessed that at the age of 7, I already had a wedding scrapbook. In it, I stuck pictures of wedding dresses, floral arrangements, and countless outfit ideas for bridesmaids, maids of honor, and flower girls. I had an entire 10 pages just for wedding cakes. As I got older, my dream continued to grow. I still have my scrapbook, but I started using Pinterest instead. I spent hours on there. I collected more wedding ideas and made virtual friends who were also obsessed with weddings. They were much older than me because I was still only 16. 16 was an exciting age because it meant that soon I could be legally married. But first, I had to find someone suitable enough to be my husband. I dated several guys in high school, but nothing ever worked out. My biggest heartbreak was with Harvey. We had been going steady for 7 months. He had most of the qualities I was looking for. He was smart, good looking, and his parents were rich. Most importantly, he'd look great in a tux. But one day, I was using his laptop to browse some more floral arrangements when I discovered that he was cheating on me. Some girl named Hannah was sending him messages complimenting him on what a great kisser he was and how she looked forward to more dates with him in the future. How could he do this to me? I'd lost my husband. So the next few months were quite depressing for me. I tried talking to friends, but that didn't help. I tried reading books on how to get over an ex-boyfriend, but that didn't help either. One afternoon, I tried window shopping at a bridal store to cheer myself up. I didn't realize that this would add to my heartbreak. I started crying, and as I tried to leave the store, I bumped into the most sinister-looking woman I had ever seen. "What's wrong, sweetie?" She grinned. Nothing, I'm okay," I replied. "Oh, Daisy, I can tell that something is wrong. Anyway, that boy didn't deserve you. Cheating on you like that? What a douchebag. Would you like to join me for a cup of tea next door?" she said. How did she know my name? I was surprised that she knew about my situation and a bit intrigued by her whole demeanor. I figured I had nothing left to lose, so I followed her next door to the little tea shop. I had never noticed it before. We sat down and the waiter immediately served us. Somehow he knew exactly what I wanted. "What's going on? How did he?" I gasped. "Well, dear, some of us are just extraordinary." She winked at me. What? I went completely blank. "What would you say if I could introduce you to a group of people who would make all your dreams come true? I know that you're sad now, but this change could really turn your life around for the better," she said. "A group of people? What are you all? Witches?" I asked. She started laughing so much she nearly spilled her drink. "Of course not, dear. We are just extraordinary people who are able to see and do more than, ordinary ones. You could have a really bright future with us. We will ensure that you always have enough money and that you will never endure any hardship in life. You just have to be completely devoted to us and we will take care of the rest. You'll have enough money to do whatever you please and you will always be comfortable in life," she explained. "This sounds like a cult," I said. "Don't call it that. Let's just use the word organization instead. Think about it. Come back tomorrow after you've made up your mind and I'll introduce you to our leader," she said. I finished my drink and left. That night, I thought really hard. I had really sort of given up on finding true love. So if I could have everything else, then why should I hesitate? I guessed I could always leave if I wasn't happy or if I wasn't too freaked out by everything. I showed up at the tea shop the next day and the strange woman was already waiting for me. She sat at a larger table with 2 men who looked just as strange. "Hi, Daisy. We've been waiting for you," one of them said. Hi," I replied. "Have you made your decision?" the woman asked. "Yes, I'm in," I said, so excitedly I surprised myself. "Great. My name is Esme, by the way. This is Robert, our leader," she said while pointing to the man who had been silent. "I'm very pleased to hear about your interest in our organization. Before you can become a full member, you must be initiated. Please follow me," he said. He led us to a door which led to a huge empty room. There was a stage on one end. "This is where we have meetings and perform rituals," he said. My eyes nearly dropped out of my head. Did he just say rituals? What had I gotten myself into? "Don't worry. We won't make you do anything too intense in the beginning," he said. He explained certain details that I can't reveal in this video, and then I signed a contract which sort of said that they owned me from then on. I would have to do everything they said, but I'd always have everything I wanted and more. So I was okay with that. I attended all meetings and rituals until I became a well-known member of the group. I was still balancing this life with school and home. Nobody knew I was a part of this group, not even my best friend. When I left to go to meetings, my parents just thought I was going to dance practice or hang out with my friends. I felt very happy to be part of a group where I belonged, even if we were engaged in some really strange activities. It was the best part of my life until my final year of high school, the year I met Richard. Richard moved to our school from a nearby school because he was expelled. He never told me why, but I tried to just see him for who he was. I couldn't imagine him doing anything bad at all, ever. He was well-mannered and polite. In fact, he was the perfect gentleman. We met when my Spanish teacher asked him to sit next to me. I felt so comfortable talking to him that we exchanged numbers and spoke more frequently until we were inseparable. We did almost everything together. We studied, watched movies, read the same books, and hung out almost every weekend. As we grew closer and closer, I began to remember the dream dream I always had to get married to the perfect man and have a perfect wedding. Although we were closer than ever, I could never tell him about my secret life in the cult. I didn't want to imagine what he'd think about me after that, so I always kept it hidden. This went on for 2 years after we left high school. We were both working to save money for college, and although we still lived with our parents, we were trying to figure out how we could eventually live together. One afternoon, as we went strolling hand in hand through the park, Richard said, "Hey, we've been working very hard. Why don't we go on a mini vacation?" "Where could we go? We don't have much money," I said. "Don't worry, I've got a plan. Just pack a bag," he replied while smiling. The next weekend, he blindfolded me and I got into his car. After a few hours of driving, he finally said, "We're here." When I took off the blindfold, I was in front of the most luxurious hotel I had ever seen in my life. "You're kidding, right? We can't afford this," I said. "Come with me," he smiled. He took me up to our room, which was lit by candlelight and filled with the scent of roses. "It's so beautiful here. It's like we're on our honeymoon," I squealed with joy. "Our honeymoon will be even better," he smirked. Suddenly, he got down on one knee and asked me to marry him. Yes, I will marry you," I said while jumping into his arms. We had the most amazing weekend ever. When we got back to our town, I decided that it was time to start planning my wedding. I was finally going to achieve my biggest dream ever. I took out all my scrapbooks and began reviewing my old ideas. I had about 20 color schemes planned and 10 potential venues. I began to imagine my life after the wedding too. Our honeymoon would be perfect. We'd have a lovely house and a perfect little family. While I was filled with thoughts of my future with Richard, my phone rang. It was Esme. I sighed and snapped back to reality. "I didn't see you this weekend. What's going on?" she said. "I had to leave town for a while," I replied. "I need you to come to the meeting room this afternoon," she said, and then hung up. I sat down filled with dread. I was so caught up in my bliss that I had completely forgotten that I was part of this organization. Now that Richard had asked me to marry him, I was finally going to have what I had always wanted. I didn't need to be part of their group any longer. Also, Richard would never approve. What would I tell him? What would I tell our children? I had to find a way to get out, but I didn't know how. I went to the meeting a few minutes early, and Esme was already waiting. I explained to her that my boyfriend proposed and that I might not be able to continue my life with them. She stared at me for a while and then said, "Part of our agreement is that you're not allowed to leave, ever. If you do, we will have to harm you. You're already too deep. You know too many of our secrets." After the meeting, I went home and decided to simply continue like I always had, hiding my secret from Richard and everyone else who knew me. Fast forward to my wedding day. Everything was going just as planned. We had decided on an outdoor wedding with a beautiful garden. I looked gorgeous in my wedding dress and my bridal party was just as fabulous. As my father walked me down the aisle, I nearly cried because it was all happening exactly how I had always imagined it as a child. I stared at Richard, who was even more handsome than he usually was. I wanted to kiss and embrace him right there, even before we said our vows. The ceremony was ideal until the priest asked, "Does anyone object to this union?" I heard a loud voice from the crowd. "We do." I turned my head and realized that 10 of my cult members were standing up. They were all dressed in black. Esme walked up to the podium and took the microphone. "Daisy belongs to us, and we do not approve of this marriage. We have already decided who her husband will be, and it is not Richard," she said. "How could you do this to me? Please don't. I love him," I pleaded. Richard's eyes filled with tears. "How could you keep something like this from me? I trusted you," he said. I felt horrible. Suddenly, 5 cops came running down the aisle. They grabbed Richard. "You're under the arrest for an involvement in the recent bank robbery and under investigation for a string of robberies which happened in the last few months," one of the officers said. It all made sense. That was how he got all that money. "Richard!" I screamed. Although he lied to me and he was probably a thief, he was still the love of my life. My heart ached. Esme looked at me emotionlessly. "Come on, let's go." I had no choice but to follow, while leaving all our guests in awe. I guess this is a wedding they'll never forget.
Hi, my name is Mary, and my brother James ruined the most important day of my life. I'm still furious, and this happened months ago. I'm finally ready to talk about it, and I'd like everyone to know how much of a horrible person he truly is. Growing up with James was an absolute nightmare. I know you must be thinking I'm just blowing this out of proportion, but just hear me out. This isn't normal, annoying brother stuff. He was awful towards me. He always said nasty stuff, broke all my toys, and would throw terrible temper tantrums. He was irritating and mean, and everything had to be about him. It was as if James wasn't happy unless he was the center of attention every single day. He hated my parents being proud of me, and so whenever I did something good, he'd act up all the worse, just to get them to focus on him again. He didn't care if the attention he received was good or bad, as long as he was in the spotlight. It was incredibly frustrating, but I figured my brother had problems, and I tried to help him. He only took advantage of my kindness and would mess with me every single time. I thought I was forced to love my brother, and so I kept giving him new chances, but he always would end up disappointing me. It took me the longest time to realize he simply wasn't worth my time at all. I cried so many times over the horrible things he did until I gave up trying. It hurt, but I knew it was for the better. My dad kept telling me that it was just a phase and that he'd outgrow it eventually. I used to think that at first too, but now I don't believe it any longer. He's a horrible person and he'll never, ever change. Living with him was a complete nightmare, and I tried never ever to bring any friends home. I knew he'd find a way of making their lives a living hell during the time they were under the same roof as he was. At school, he spent most of his time suspended, and he would fail most of his classes. He always tried to cheat off me, and I tried to stop him because I didn't want to be punished for what he did. James was a messed up kid, and everyone at my school thought he was a freak. Honestly, since he was my brother, I tried to keep others from bullying him at first. Whenever I did, though, he'd end up getting me in some kind of embarrassing and weird problem, and so I completely gave up after a while. You can't even imagine how relieved I was when I finally decided to leave home for college. It meant being far away from my horrible brother. It was as if I could enjoy my own room for the first time in my life without worrying if someone had put something nasty in my bed or pulled a cruel prank on me. I was really happy, and honestly, I didn't miss him at all. I did call my mom and dad often, but I never asked to speak to James. Fortunately, he didn't want to speak to me either, apparently, and so we just seemed to ignore each other. In my first year of college, I ended up meeting a great guy named Tom. He was amazing and the complete opposite of my brother James. He was caring, loving, and never did anything to hurt me. I was amazed that a guy that great could really fall in love with me, and he showed me that I was worthy of real love. My brother's cruelty had messed up my self-confidence, but Tom helped me change that. I got a great job after graduating from college and ended up moving with Tom. We were so happy together. I worked as a computer programmer at the same place he did, and we seemed to have the perfect life. My parents met Tom a few times, and they adored him. He also knew many of my friends and other relatives, but not my brother. He wanted to meet him to see if maybe my brother had changed. I think Tom noticed I was still sad about everything that had happened between us. I mean, even if he was so cruel, James was still my brother, right? Eventually, Tom asked me to marry him, and of course, I said yes. He was the love of my life, and I couldn't wait to be his wife. And so the planning began. It was a lot of work, and Mom helped me out a lot. I had to pick up the venue, my dress, the decorations, everything. And that included the guest list. That was when things got tricky. I had to figure out who I was going to invite. Of course, my whole family would be there, as well as Tom's. Many of our closest friends as well. We invited our boss to be polite, but knew he wouldn't show up. Some of our coworkers were also invited, and they were so excited for us. They said we were the cutest couple ever. The big question on my mind was, should I invite James? Tom told me it was up to me, and Mom told me she'd respect whatever I decided to do. It was hard to make up my mind, honestly, and I ended up deciding it was better if he didn't come at all. I knew it would be trouble if I invited him because he'd end up doing something cruel. The real problem was, I felt awfully guilty about it. Even after everything he had done to me in the past, he was still my brother, and siblings are supposed to love each other, right? It was going to be the most special night of my life, and my brother wasn't going to be there. My mom seemed upset as well, and that hurt me. Mom was great, and she always wanted James to become a better person. I wondered if I was doing my family more harm than good by refusing to invite James. As the date grew closer, my brother somehow discovered I was getting married. Mom and Dad didn't tell him about it, but maybe one of my other relatives did. The thing is, James called me and asked me if he was invited. I was surprised by his question and took it as a good sign. Maybe he was getting better after all and actually wanted to make up for all the stuff he did over the years. Maybe he had outgrown his cruel behavior. I asked him if he wanted to come, and he said he'd love to. He sounded so sincere. I told him I'd think about it and call him back. He wasn't invited, and it probably would be easier just to keep him from going to the party, but I began feeling really bad about it. It would be too cruel not to let him come, and so I called him back and officially invited him to my wedding. James sounded surprisingly happy, and this worried me. Could he be planning to do something bad? Or maybe he had really changed. The day finally arrived. James had seemed a bit upset at first about me not inviting him from the get-go, but he seemed to be over it by the time of the party. Everything was perfect. My wedding gown was beautiful. My hair was lovely. Tom looked so handsome. Mom was crying tears of happiness, and the venue was gorgeous. Nothing was going wrong, and I was incredibly happy. Even James seemed to be having a good time. It was amazing. I was so relieved and started thinking that maybe he could become a part of my life and be an uncle to my future kids with Tom. He met my husband and was really pleasant. But soon I'd realize it was all an act. Right after saying our vows, people started screaming. I didn't understand what was happening, but then I saw it. My brother had knocked down the table the cake was on. Everyone saw him doing it and were screaming at him, but James simply ran away. I was so upset. How could he be so cruel and conceited? Everything had to be about him, even if that meant ruining his sister's big day. My mom hugged me really tight as the caterers tried to fix the problem. She told me she was sorry about what my brother had done. I was so upset. I told her I should have never invited him, and she agreed. At least my parents had my back. I thought that was the end of it and accepted the fact that my wedding cake was ruined. I wouldn't let my brother ruin the rest of the wedding, though, and so we carried on as if nothing had happened. Little did I know that this was only the beginning, and it was about to get worse. Far, far worse. What happened next made me realize that James had planned this all along. It hadn't been a spur-of-the-moment thing. A few minutes later, my brother came back, but no one saw him. Why? Well, he had a plan in motion, and he made sure no one saw a thing. He turned off all the lights in the venue, and the next thing we knew, a bunch of nasty animals flooded the place. There were rats, snakes, frogs, and all kinds of creepy crawlers. Everyone was freaking out and opening the doors and windows to escape. That was when a horrible stench filled the place. James had actually released a fart gas into the ventilation system and made the whole room smell horrible. The whole night was ruined, and all the money we spent was lost. A few of the guests actually had to go to the hospital because they had mild panic attacks. James knew full well that our Aunt Laura is scared to death of snakes, and she freaked out when they began crawling all around the floor. Everyone had to leave, and the night was an absolute disaster. I was mortified and spent weeks apologizing to everyone I knew for my brother's actions. Everyone was so understanding and told me it wasn't my fault. I should have known better and refused to invite him just as I had decided at first. My brother will never, ever change, and everyone in my family is furious at him. Mom and Dad refused to speak to him, and I don't ever want to hear about him again. He planned this whole messed up thing way ahead of time, and I can't even understand why. I'm still incredibly upset, but at least my honeymoon was perfect. Nothing went wrong because my brother wasn't around. Tom promised we'd celebrate again when we have our first anniversary and throw a beautiful wedding party, this time without James there. I hope my brother doesn't try to show up and mess that up as well. Thanks for watching. What's the meanest thing someone you are related to ever did? Let us know in the comments. Please don't forget to subscribe and check out other videos on the channel.